Let's welcome Anton, Cherepanov, and Yanni Boutin, who will talk us about the Buhtrap metamorphosis, going from cybercrime to cyber-espionage. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
All
Thank
yours.
you, Luis. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So, Buhtrap metamorphosis. So, it's a criminal group that has transitioned from trying to make money to making espionage, right? So before we dive in, I'm Jean Boutin, and together with my colleague Anton Cherepanov, we will go through this metamorphosis, right? So in the audience, who is aware of the Buhtrap group and their actions? By show of hand. Mathieu? Oh yeah, the ESET guys. All right, excellent. So let me walk you through a bit of a timeline of how this research started and how we discovered this group using a 0 day against their target. So this whole research started in 2014 when we started seeing some very interesting packages. So we were seeing an NSYS pack downloader that would install on a system a lot of different tools. So they were legitimate ones, but there were also tools to fingerprint the machine, trying to find what's on the machine, trying to avoid sandboxes, trying to avoid EV detection as well. But there were two tools that were really key in this attack. So the first one was the Buhtrap Backdoor, so kind of their custom backdoor that consisted of a keylogger, so they would be able to know what the user was typing on a compromised machine, but also it was monitoring smart cards that were inserted on the system. So these smart cards might be used by different users to make, let's say, financial transactions. So they were monitoring for these type of events, but they were also installing on the system a remote access tool, which means that they could access remotely the computer or the system and control it. So we were tracking these guys, and they were very active, targeting a lot of different people, mostly in Russia. One thing that really helped us on this is they were using a lot of code signing certificate, like this one. So by tracking these certificates, we were able to actually see a lot of their activities, and they were using quite a lot of them. So at the time, we didn't know exactly who they were after. So we knew they were mostly targeting people in Russia, but we started considering what they might be after. So this is a type of decoy documents that these guys were using. So basically, they would send spear phishing email, and if the people would double-click on the attachment, it would install all of their tools, plus show this decoy document to try to make sure that the people will not be suspicious by opening it. So this one is an invoice. This one is actually a contract, so telecommunication contract. And this is a type of documents that accounting department might receive. And the domains that these guys were using for command and control servers were actually mimicking a lot of resources that accountant might be accessing. So we're talking about forums where they could download templates or templates of contracts. And based on all of this and our telemetry, we assessed that they were mostly interested in accounting departments in businesses in Russia, trying probably to make fraudulent transfer. So this is when we coined the name Buhtrap. So we actually published a blog post in 2015, Operation Buhtrap. So why Buhtrap? Well, in Russian, accountant is bugalter, right, Anton? Yes. So this is why we came up with Buhtrap to the trap for accountant. And this name actually stayed, and this is how this group is referred to as of today. So throughout our monitoring, we find these guys were very active. And one thing that stood out was the fact that they seem to have a lot of ties with criminal underground. So they were using Microsoft Word Intruder. So some of you might remember this framework. So it's basically a Word document that is trying to exploit different vulnerabilities in Microsoft Word. So they would be able to install their malware if the user was using one of the Microsoft Word versions that were vulnerable to these attacks. And these guys have been using this framework a long time ago, so it became public, but these guys were having access to it really early on. The other tool that they were using to try to compromise their targets is Nitrous exploit kit. So this kit was used only to deliver a couple of different payloads. One of them was Buhtrap, the other one was Corco, which was also a banking Trojan targeting businesses in Russia. So this shows that they had ties to the operator of this Nitrous kit. The last thing I want to bring to your attention is the fact that these guys were using a lot of different ACK tools but also multiple local privilege escalations. So we're not talking about 0 day, we're talking mostly about 1 day. So we would see Microsoft patch some of these vulnerabilities, and a couple of months later, we'd see these guys using it. What's interesting about it is that we assigned that they were actually using a third-party developer to code these, because we had very distinctive PDB path. So here you see mimi.pddb. This is actually a modified version of Mimikatz. Mimikatz is a very powerful tool to try to extract passwords on the system. And you can see here a name, so Volodymyr. And this name showed up in multiple tools that these guys were using, mostly to try to elevate privilege or to use these Mimikatz things. So we also saw, as I said, local privilege exploit. So this one in the PDB path, it's easier to identify. It says that it's CV 2015-2546. And again, you have this Volodymyr name that shows up. And this will be important, especially in Anton's part, because this is something we saw in the attack that was using a 0 day tied to this group. So this guy had multiple different tools. Another one was a plugin. So it was abusing HTTPS everywhere from Electronic Frontier Foundation, so EFF. And this plugin is meant to redirect users to the HTTPS version of a website if it's available. And these guys were using this plugin or abusing it to try to redirect users to malicious websites. So if we go back to the timeline, so up to the fall 2015, they were mostly interested in businesses. But then we saw a shift. So we saw spear phishing email like this one that was meant to be, that was directed towards executive and financial institutions. So if the user would click and open up the attachment, not only would it try to install the Buhtrap backdoor, but it will also show decoy document like this one. So I'm not sure if you can read Russian, but this is basically saying, and this is an invitation to some kind of seminar to executive and financial institutions. So we were seeing a lot of documents, such as this one. So this one is mimicking an adversary from FinCert. So FinCert is a cert that the Russian authorities created to try to protect financial institutions in Russia against cybercrime. So these guys were targeting these banks and using these adversary to legitimate their actions. So we didn't know at that time how successful they were. So we were seeing a constant stream of attacks against financial institutions. But in 2016, Group IB published a report saying that these guys were in fact very successful. So they were able to steal 25 million from 13 different banks in Russia over a 6-month period. This is a lot of money in a short period, meaning that these guys were very, very capable, very sophisticated. So one thing that was somewhat odd to us is that we were still tracking them, and once again we witnessed a shift in their target. So towards the end of 2015, so a few months after they started targeting financial institutions, we started seeing them target governmental institution. So this is a document, the decoy document that they were using, and this decoy document, of course, would be installing, not the decoy document, but the overall package would be installing the Buhtrap backdoor, and was showing this document. So this is basically a document which states that how to process people that do not have permanent residency or a valid passport, which is not something that businesses or financial institutions would be required to hear about. And the very different things about this one as well is that all the decoy documents we've seen before were in Russian, whereas this one, if you can notice, is actually Ukrainian. So they were trying to target these governmental institutions. We're seeing it in our telemetry, different decoy documents. This one is asking for information on a specific passport holder, and we're seeing this type of thing, which seem very odd because they were mostly interested in financial gains before, and now we're seeing some hint of espionage. So another decoy document I want to bring your attention on is this one. The content is not really interesting. It's just saying people to send email address, contact information to the sender of the email, and it was then saying that they had a legitimate website. So this one, so the dmsu.biz. Of course, this is a malicious website. It's not the real one, but it's mimicking one governmental organization they were after. And this decoy document was seen only a few months after they were after a financial institution. And I don't know if you remember these decoy documents I showed you a few minutes earlier. So this is the one inviting financial institution executive to some seminar. And you can see there's also a domain name there. And we compared the WHOIS information from both the one that was targeting governmental organization and financial institution and saw that the WHOIS information were almost the same. You can see here, the registered name is the same, the address, also the email. So I will not go through all of them, but basically all information that was there was identical, plus they were created about a month apart. So this led us to, we strongly believe that these are the same guys that were operating the campaigns against financial institutions and businesses, and were now transitioning to governmental organization. Now, we were seeing this, we were sitting on this because we didn't really know what was happening, and then plot twist, 2016, February, we saw that this post on some underground forum. So this one comes from exploit.in. So some of you might know this cybercrime criminal underground forum. And in there, what it says is that throughout all their campaigns, these guys were able to make a lot of money. So the top guys of the organization, of the group, were able to make a lot of money. But this guy says that he's a software developer and that he was basically making very poor money, a disgruntled employee, basically. And he decided to release the source code of all the tools that Buhtrap was using. So now everyone had access to this tool and could then reuse it. So of course, for us as researchers, this is very difficult after that to keep track of who's using what and who was the original organizer, the original perpetrator of all these attacks. So we're not sure if this is true or not, but this definitely made our job a bit harder. So we're still seeing in our telemetry campaigns against governmental organization, but we were seeing as well a lot of people reusing the source code available. And we published this year, earlier this summer, a campaign that was distributing the Buhtrap backdoor through malvertising. So they were using Yandex Direct, which is a major advertising platform, trying to direct people to download this Buhtrap backdoor. But they were not only trying to install this backdoor, they were also trying to put ransomware on the system. So we're not sure whether the ties were to the original author, but we could see a lot of activity. So we sat on the governmental organization targeting from this group for a long time until we found something really interesting that Anton will talk about.
I will talk about how we discovered Zero Day last summer. I was not looking for Buhtrap, I was looking for exploits, and I found one. As all good discoveries, it happened on Friday evening. I analyzed the file, and a few days after I reported it to Microsoft, and Microsoft, they did a really great job. They patched it during next patch Tuesday, so they released the patch on July. So what vulnerability we're talking about? We're talking about privilege escalation vulnerability. It was in Win32k component. Specifically, it was null pointer reference in kernel related to a pop-up menu object. Let's analyze how it worked. So the exploit, it creates two windows, and for first window it creates pop-up menu, and of course it's just an example of pop-up menu. Exploit doesn't display this pop-up menu. So exploit must catch a moment when the initial menu is created, but submenu only is about to create it. To do that, it sets up hooks, and when the system is in such state, it sends cancel menu. And now in kernel, if we check the kernel mode, we see that this tag pop-up menu structure, it doesn't contain null pointer. And this null pointer it's still used by kernel, which allows attacker to use null pointer reference. For that, they need to allocate memory at null page. And by using this function, they are able to change one bit in kernel. So what bit they want to change? They want to change B server-side window prod bit in tag windy structure of second window. When this bit is not set, the function of window will be executed in user mode. When this bit is set, it will be executed in kernel mode. So when it will be executed in kernel mode, they can use kernel shellcode to obtain system privilege. So that's how this exploit worked. The important question you must ask, why Buhtrap needs 0-day? Because it's a standard user mode malware. It works well even without 0-day. And the main reason why attacker used 0-day, it's a tool that they call anti-node. And node is the name of our product. And anti-node is their name of this tool. The main purpose of this tool is to tamper with protection of our product. They want to disable some very important settings like cloud protection, memory scanner, and they also made attempt to add this file to exclusion list. And it's important to note here that this tool is designed to work only against some older version of Node that was released 7 years ago. So let's wrap it up. It was exploit that worked only against Windows 7 32 bits because Microsoft backported the page from newer version of Windows, and it's not possible to allocate null page in 64-bit version of Windows. And we saw only one target in our telemetry, and I think it's amazing that we are able to protect customer even if the customer use outdated version of Windows and old version of our product. And who is behind this exploit? We think it's Vladimir because the PDB path contains Vladimir string. So that's all from my side.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Anton. So yeah, you've seen the PDP path, same Vladimir that we've seen before. One thing that is interesting to note as well is that the tool that was trying to bypass our antivirus, we've seen it before. So the developer themselves called it anti-node, and this is one tool that we've seen them use throughout their campaigns in 2014, 2015, and so on. So before talking about the zero-day attack itself, let's take a step back. And so as I was saying earlier, we were trying to track all the campaigns from this group, and we were seeing that they were still targeting governmental organizations, but they were kind of updating their tools. So in 2019, we saw this document. So it's not really important. It's some kind of contract still written in Ukrainian, and they were installing the Buhtrap backdoor through it. But one thing that is interesting to note is that they started to introduce new tools as they were progressing in their campaigns. One of them was a grabber tool. So what it is used for, it was actually trying to collect passwords that were stored on the victim's computer. So they were trying to harvest passwords from email clients or browsers, and then trying to exfiltrate it. So they had two different means for this. So they would either just post it. So it was a very simple tool, just trying to harvest them and then send it off to a CNC server. Here you can see the version that is sending post requests. You have the domain name here, so secure telemetry.net. I just want to point out that these guys used to love Secure, Telemetry, Microsoft, Redmond. All of their domain names are a variation of these words. And the other method that these guys were using was actually email. So here you can see a PowerShell script being built that will then send to an email address the content of the passwords it was able to gather on the system. So now going back to the zero-day case we had. So the zero-day was delivered through an NSYS-packed downloader. So this is something that we've seen quite a bit from this group. So as Anton said, was trying to limit privileges, for trying to disable AV, but one of the tools that these guys were using was a log tool. So what they were trying to see is what exclusions were set up on the machine, probably to see whether the attack was successful. We're not too sure why they were using it, but this tool will come back and will make another tie to the original group. So if we look at all the links between this attack and the Buhtrap group, so we have this NSYS package that they've been using throughout all these years, right? We also have network IUC overlap between the different campaigns. Then we have a crypto overlap. So this one is interesting because it goes a long way back. So this is a screenshot of the log tools that I've just talked about. So the one that is listing the exclusion on the settings of the antivirus. And you can see here a key, which is in fact an RC4 key. And it's also used in the grabber tool. So this is a screenshot from the grabber. But what is very interesting about this key is that it has been used forever. Like for years, they've been using this key to encrypt communication of the backdoor. So even in 2014, 2015, we were seeing this key in their actual malware. Then there are some modules overlap. So while looking for additional malware on the machine, we saw that they were trying to install the grabber module as well. So we know that this system was clearly of interest to this group, so this governmental organization. Then the victimology, so as we saw, they were transitioning from one type of victim to the other. So they started with businesses in Russia, then we've seen them going after financial institutions in Russia, and that was backed up by external analysis as well. And then before the source code leak, we've seen them transition to this governmental organization. So we can see that this is consistent with their targeting. Then the usage of code signing certificate, up until now, they are still using them, and we are able to link through code signing certificate the tools that were signed using the same certificate and that were used for different purposes as well. So, to wrap up, you know that the campaign is still active. We have new tools that are introduced. We've seen them use Meterpreter, for example. We've seen them use DNS tunneling as well, but there's always a constant in all of these campaigns where we can easily tie it back to the original perpetrators. We've seen also new targets. We've seen a campaign against a governmental institution in Central Asia that was trying to that was probably trying to install some backdoors. This is the decoy document. As you can see, it's the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, so we're not sure exactly who was targeted, but Central Asia is definitely a region of focus for this guy. So we can assume that they will likely increase their targeting in the future, and we'll, of course, keep track of them. So the question I get quite a bit is it really Buhtrap? Are you able to tie it all these years to the same people that were targeting businesses and financial institutions? So, of course, Anton and I cannot be 100% sure. But there are so many similarities between all of these campaigns that we are highly confident that some of these guys, or at least one of them, are actually transitioning and using the same tools and using the same methodologies that we use against businesses and against financial institutions to now target governmental organization. And it brings up an interesting question. So we've seen in the past some criminal groups targeting or at least trying to exfiltrate sensitive data. Some of you might remember this Game Over Zeus botnet that were trying to find keywords in compromised system to try to exfiltrate data. And now we have this other case. So it will be interesting to continue to monitor these and see whether we can find other instances of such group transitioning or metamorphosing into a different type of targets. So with it, thank you very much for your attention.